Tonight we have a very special guest, a man who has written over 30 books, who's an internationally known figure as an author, lecturer, philosopher, a stand-up comedian, a sit-down comedian, stand-up philosopher, you name it, Mr. Robert Anton Wilson. Bob, thanks very much for being here tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Good. Now, your latest book...
You ever have one of those weeks where a whole confluence of things all happen seemingly at random, and yet it all fits together so perfectly that you have to wonder if you're in fact a character in someone else's fiction?
Is this real life?
That's been happening to me as I've been preparing to listen to Sophie's album Oil of Every Pearl's Uninsides for the first time. The first bit of synchronicity. So last week, as I was creating the video for my riveting exploration of Die Antwoord's Donker Mag. She seems nice. Well, despite the fact that I had ordered my copy of Sophie's album a couple weeks before Christmas, it still hadn't arrived yet. So I'd have to find some other way of tagging that Sophie was the next album up. Well, just as I was in the middle of marking up a screenshot showing my order status, up comes our amazing postal carrier with the album in tow.
The mail's here.
So I was able to complete the video exactly on time.
And there was much rejoicing.
The next weird synchronicity concerns the YouTube recommendation algorithm. See, there's this YouTube creator named Vi Hart, who is an insanely smart, funny, and curious person who posts videos on both math and music. Her video, 12 Tones, might be the single best thing on the internet. I mean it.
After all, being art isn't a property of a thing, but in how we perceive that thing.
And from all the times I watched Vi Hart, YouTube's recommendation engine thought I might also like a channel on YouTube called 12 Tone, hosted by a very smart music theory expert.
This is YouTube, so no matter what I say, some of y'all are going to read this as a declaration of war, but that's not what I'm going for.
And according to Twitter, they use they-them pronouns too. And from 12 Tone, I was recommended Vox Earworm.
80 minutes of music on Trout Mask Replica by Captain Beefheart and his magic band have been compared to rusty barbed wire.
And from Vox Earworm, I was recommended PBS Soundfield.
Because if you don't like the blues, you don't like your mama.
Which turned out was a good thing. Bright and shiny in my YouTube feed last week is a new video from Soundfield, released just a few days previous, which looks at the emerging genre of hyperpop. And look at that, Sophie's right there on the cover art.
There's no one way to define hyperpop.
And so from Soundfield, I learned about this genre of hyperpop. I learned that Sophie is the most influential producer in that scene, a genre that fully embraces the chaotic, distorted, shiny, crunchy kinds of sounds that you get when you overprocess music. Well, that is until Sophie passed away in 2021 at the age of 34. Which brings me to the third and probably the saddest bit of synchronicity that happened to me this week. The story I heard was that Sophie was staying at a hotel, I think in Greece, and one night she was trying to get a picture of the moon when she fell from her balcony. So like Mikio Fujioka from Baby Metal, Sophie died at an early age from a fall while observing the night sky. That's almost too weird to be a coincidence. And one last thing to prove that I'm definitely living inside someone else's simulation. The second song on Oil of Every Pearl's Uninsides is called Pony Boy, which also just happens to be the name of the last song on the Allman Brothers Band album Brothers and Sisters. The one with me on the cover. And Sophie had a single in 2014 called Lemonade, which there's also the name of an album by Beyonce, which had a song on it with Jack White, and Jack White worked with Dominic John Davis, and Dominic John Davis and I did a gig with Luther Dickinson in Mississippi. Okay, enough of that. It's time to give Sophie a listen and fire up Lyric Genius. Ooh, I bet that if you take the first letter of every word from one of the songs, it spells out a secret message for you. Yeah, maybe it spells get a life, Vaylor.
Lock up the door, put the pony on all fours.
Final album of the season. And we have Sophie. There wasn't any particular reason why I chose Sophie as the last one. However, I did choose it because I know that hyperpop as a genre is pretty new in the mainstream, like very new in the mainstream within the last 10 years or so. And I know that my dad has had no experience listening to it, so might as well introduce a new genre here. In terms of what I think about the album, there are a couple songs that I really, really, really enjoy. It kind of, if it makes sense, a couple of the songs scratch my brain. You know, they kind of scratch the itchy feeling in my brain. So Face Shopping, for example, is a really good example of a making my brain smoother by listening to it song, if that makes any sense.
After the first song, I thought this album was going to be largely a throwback. It's Okay to Cry is a lush and sad and sparkly song with lots of Yamaha DX7 type sounds on top.
I hope you don't take this the wrong way.
But then the next two songs, Pony Boy and Face Shopping, those are sounds I'd never heard before. And how often does that happen anymore? And much of the rest of the album swings back and forth between those two vibes. Chimey, synth-heavy, FM synth DX7 type melodic torch songs on one hand, mixed with noisy industrial and experimental grooves on the other. But it's not just the heavy distortion on the drum tracks. There are other elements of the music that seem to come directly from the artifacts that are created by the manipulation of music and video for use on like memes or Vines or TikToks and stuff. Ever heard of Nightcore? So there's that sped up, wavering, kawaii sounding vocal in Infatuation, for example. And there's these looped effects in Not Okay. So far, it's all very distracting. I'm having a hard time hearing the music for the notes, if you get what I'm saying. But it isn't like an instant dislike kind of a thing either. What it's like Sophie is having so much fun creating sounds that she's forgotten to use them to make actual songs. But even as I say that out loud, I'm hearing how narrow-minded and judgy it kind of sounds, especially considering some of the more challenging music that I absolutely adore. I'm not giving up, though. Even in the PBS Soundfield Hyperpop documentary, the hosts start off less than enthusiastic, but they end up really getting into it at the end.
Like, understand this music and be like, all right, why did someone ever make something that sounds like this? I hate it. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, this actually slaps really hard.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this. I'm listening to this in the shower. Why is this so catchy?
Okay, Sophie, let's go again.
Track down the whips, make the pony bite the bits.
I didn't expect there to be as many kind of like longer experimental tracks as there were, rather than just hyperpop. You know, if you wanted a better example of like just hyperpop, you know, Sophie is kind of the mother of the genre. Sophie kind of paved the way for a lot of hyperpop genre or hyperpop artists to kind of step into the light. But if you wanted a more straightforward, like straight hyperpop album, go to 100 gecs. But if you really want to see the art behind it and kind of see where it came from, listen to Sophie. Yeah, I mean, I think hyperpop is, as a genre, very accessible. You know, Sophie created this entire album on Ableton Live, a, you know, very cheap program. She did it well. She only used one sound pack, I think. I'm sure my dad will talk more about it. And it's accessible. It's extremely accessible. And for a younger generation such as myself and this upcoming generation, our ears are kind of more used to more abrasive and jarring sounds. You know, I think a really good way to describe hyperpop for anyone that's been a cheerleader, it's kind of queer-coded cheer music in a way. You know, very jarring bridges in between sections and very loud noises and unconventional noises. It's queer-coded cheer music.
How I'm feeling after a week of Oil of Every Pearl's on Insides. Honestly, the entire season feels that it has been directly leading to this point. Since this is the last episode of season 2, it all feels like one great conjunction.
What's the great conjunction? You tell me.
And it all probably comes from the fact that there have been so many assumptions and biases that have been challenged during this past 6 months. So many thoughts about music I never thought I'd have. And with this last one, Sophie has challenged me to go even one step further than that. First of all, Sophie made all her music with a laptop, Ableton Live, and an Ableton push device, and an external sound module. And in doing so, she became the most prominent figure in the world of hyperpop. And I know that for some of you out there, the fact that no air molecules were pushed around by an approved list of real musical instruments, that means this music doesn't count for you, that somehow it's not real music. And I'm not entirely unsympathetic to that way of thinking, so what I did is I just ran the experiment for myself. What I did is I asked Emily to find a short poem that she'd written, and I asked her to read it into a microphone. And then I played her an E-flat chord, and I asked her to sing that same poem in the key of E-flat. Once I had those recordings, I put them into Ableton Live and my own push device, and I tried to create my own hyperpop song using the same techniques that Sophie has used, from what I've been able to determine. It's up on SoundCloud if you want to hear it. It's called MFHPS. But as someone who records new music every single week using solely kind of, traditional instruments, one thing I can tell you for sure is that it was not easier to make music using only producer tools. It requires an entirely different set of skills.
It's an entirely different kind of flying, altogether.
It's an entirely different kind of flying.
The next conjunction concerns online streaming services. This is the week that Neil Young issued his ultimatum to Spotify. Good heavens, do some of you have opinions on that? Right up top, let me say that it certainly would be a better world if more musicians could earn a living in this new streaming landscape, wouldn't it? But I still subscribe. Look, there aren't many gigging musicians I know that don't. If you are a working musician and you pick up a sub gig, largely the band leader will send you a YouTube or Spotify links for the tunes you're supposed to learn. They're tools of the trade now, which basically means that at the end of the year, when you get that thing from Spotify telling you what you listen to, it's mostly a reminder of the gigs you played that year. But as for my support for the artists, I mean, the way I see it, the best thing you can do to support artists you care about is, first of all, buy their albums. Yeah, get the album and the t-shirt and the sticker, and buy them direct from their merch table or from Bandcamp whenever possible. Then second, for me, when I listen to the album, I listen on a streaming service. That way they get money for both. They get money for the album sale, and they get a teeny bit extra for the stream.
Both is good.
But there is another side to the streaming services that no one's really talking about. Because the thing is that the streaming services allow for the creation of curated playlists. And that's an entirely new modality when it comes to the distribution and the discovery of music. There are a lot of working musicians out there who owe their success to the fact that their tracks were added to a heavily subscribed playlist. So for example, the curated hyperpop playlist on Spotify has over 250,000 subscribers. If you're a new artist in that genre and the curators notice your work, that's potentially 250,000 people that get to hear your music. Not because a media company says so, not because a radio station says so, not because a video channel says so, but because someone in that community already respects you and is vouching for you. That's not a bad thing, is it?
Not bad, not bad.
Okay, lastly and most importantly, I want to thank Astrid.
And there was much rejoicing.
Getting to work with them over the past 6 months on this project has meant an awful lot to me. I think they've done a fantastic job contributing their insight each week. There's more I can say, I suppose, about how proud I am of Astrid and how much I respect the way that they're handling some challenging things in their life. But I suppose the one way I can best express it in a public forum is like this. It's absolutely fitting that we end season 2 with Oil of Every Pearl's on Insides. I find it to be an interesting album. I find it to be skillfully made by someone who is absolutely respected and missed in their community. But honestly, when I listen to Oil of Every Pearl's on Inside, what I'm hearing is Astrid communicating with me about something that's important in their life. And I mean, what can I say? I'm a lucky guy, and I'm a proud dad.
But I had a blast, not only with this album, but with this season. I don't know if you're going to include this. I don't know if it's secret, but this is the penultimate episode of this season, so there'll be one more. And I'm excited to wrap things up. I'm sad. It's going to be weird not listening to albums anymore from my dad. But I'm really happy and lucky that I got to do this with you guys. So thank you.
Step on my clutch, can you feel the hot blood rush? Switch out the lights, make the pony trot 2 times. Pull up the reins, make the pony grease his mane. Harness your toy, just a little pony boy. Oh, give me that fast. He's my little pony boy. Pony, pony, boy, boy. Pony, pony, boy, boy. So I treat him like a pony boy, boy.